Why is it that some people can pick up a new skill so fast, while the rest of us spend weeks struggling only to forget everything the next day? It looks like some kind of talent they were born with? Well, no. The truth is far less mysterious and way more practical. Today, I'm going to show you how to learn anything more effectively. Whether you're trying to master a new language, prepare for exams, or even switch careers, these study tricks, backed by both research and real experience, will help you study smarter, not harder. Let's be honest. If you're 17, 20, maybe 25, even close to 30, you're probably trying to learn something new. Maybe it's English. Maybe it's coding. Maybe it's a new instrument or professional skills for your job. And let's face it, learning is not always fun. Most of us start out excited only to hit a wall. We struggle, we get bored, and eventually we give up. I know this because I've been there. At 22, I decided to learn design things like Photoshop, UI divided by UX, digital art, just because I loved seeing beautiful work online. But at that time, I had zero knowledge. I spent 2-3 hours every night watching YouTube tutorials, copying random exercises, testing this and that. After 6 months, I could only produce mediocre results. Later, when I discovered how to learn, not just what to learn, everything changed. I cut that timeline in half, or even less, for new skills. And that's what I want for you, to avoid the mistakes I made, and to unlock the methods that actually work. So today, let's talk about 6 major shifts that can completely change the way you study. 1. Find your motivation and mindset. 2. Use active learning, not just passive. 3. Master the art of spacing. Avoid cramming. 4. Practice retrieval. Test yourself, don't just reread. 5. Use powerful techniques. Feynman, interleaving, worked examples, teaching others. 6. Take care of yourself. Sleep, exercise, patience, so your brain can actually keep what you learn. Let's start with the foundation: mindset and motivation. Part 1. Mindset and motivation, the real fuel. Here's the truth. You don't learn better just because you're smarter than others. You learn better when you have a reason. Think about it. Why do some teenagers suddenly become fluent in Korean, even though their schools don't even offer it as a subject? Because they're crazy about K-pop. They want to understand the lyrics, follow the interviews, join the fan community. The grammar doesn't motivate them, the dream does. Why does a photographer spend endless nights figuring out Photoshop? Not because they love adjusting contrast and brightness. It's because they want their photos to shine, to get praise, to feel proud when people admire their work. And that's the first big lesson. It's not the subject itself that matters most, but the personal reason behind it. Psychologists call this intrinsic motivation when your learning connects deeply to something you value. Research confirms this. A 2021 study on academic strategies showed that students with strong personal motivation adopted better study methods and performed higher than those without it. So here's the study hack nobody talks about. Before you even open your book, take 5-10 minutes to write down why you want to learn this thing. It doesn't have to sound noble. Maybe you want to impress your boss. Maybe you want to play guitar at a party. Maybe you just don't want to feel stupid when others talk about it. Whatever it is, write it down. Stick it on your desk or your laptop. Because when the why is strong enough, you will sit through the boring repetition, the confusion, the frustration. Without it, no fancy technique will save you. You'll give up the moment things get hard. So here's your first task. Ask yourself right now, what's my why? Part 2. Active versus passive learning. Stop just reading, start doing. Normally, when we try to learn something from a book, we sit down, hold the book tight, and read it over and over all day. We try to cram as many words into our heads as possible until we can recite them perfectly. but by the next day we forget almost everything we just learned. Scientists call this way of learning passive learning. It tricks us into believing we're making progress because our eyes are moving and our hands are busy, but deep inside nothing sticks. And I can tell you from experience, it's the most common trap. For months, I kept rereading my notes before exams, thinking repetition was enough. But on the test day, my mind went blank. It was like pouring water into a bucket with holes. So, what works instead? It's something called active learning. And honestly, the difference is night and day. Active learning is when you stop just absorbing information and actually do something with it. Instead of reading passively, you close the book and ask yourself, okay, how would I explain this to a friend? You wrestle with the idea. You test yourself without looking. You make connections. Why does this happen? How does it link to what I learned last week? Even if you can't answer fully, that struggle is what makes your brain build stronger pathways. There's real science behind this. A recent study followed hundreds of students and found that the ones who relied on rereading and highlighting classic passive methods did far worse in the long run than those who tested themselves, explained ideas in their own words, and spaced their practice. In fact, psychologists have a term for this, the testing effect. Basically, every time you force yourself to recall something without looking at the answer, you're strengthening your memory like a muscle. I like to think of it like the gym. Imagine walking around, touching the weights, reading about how to lift, even watching others do squats. That's passive. You might feel like you're at the gym, but your body won't change. The only way to get stronger is to actually lift, struggle, and push. Studying is no different. If you want your brain to grow, it has to sweat a little. So here's what changed everything for me. After reading one short section, I stopped. I shut the book, and I tried to explain it out loud, as if I were teaching my younger brother. At first, it was embarrassing how much I couldn't remember. But that embarrassment, that's the gold, because now I knew exactly what I didn't understand. I went back, filled in the gaps, and the next time, my explanation flowed better. Slowly, the concepts became mine, not the author's words I was parroting, but my own understanding. Once you start learning actively, even for just 15 minutes, you'll realize how much more sticks. One active session beats 5 passive ones every single time. The moment you switch from just reading to making your brain explain, test, connect, you'll notice studying feels less like torture and more like an actual conversation with your own mind. Part 3. Spacing and avoiding cramming. Why cramming betrays you. I used to be a master of cramming. The night before an exam, I'd sit with 3 cups of coffee, stack of notes, and the promise that I would cover everything tonight. And sure enough, by 3 a.m., my brain was buzzing. I felt like I had stuffed an entire textbook into my head. The next morning, I walked into the exam room feeling half dead but weirdly confident. And then, halfway through the test, it all leaked out. I couldn't recall half of what I had forced in. Even the parts I had highlighted to death felt like strangers. By the end, I realized cramming had betrayed me. Here's the cruel truth. Cramming can help you pass tomorrow's test, but it will fail you the day after. Because cramming doesn't build real memory, it builds fragile, short-term storage. Imagine writing in the sand at the beach. The waves wash it away overnight. That's cramming. The opposite is something called spacing. Instead of dumping all your energy into one desperate night, you spread your study across days or even weeks. You revisit the material again and again, each time after a small break, and every revisit strengthens the memory a little more. Scientists have studied this for decades, and the results are clear. Spacing beats cramming every single time. In fact, researchers even looked at brain activity during sleep and found that when you revisit something after a gap, your brain replays it during the night, making the memory stronger. Think of it like watering a plant. If you dump 10 liters of water all at once, the soil gets soggy. and most of it runs off. But if you water it a little every day, the plant grows deeper roots. Your brain works the same way. When I finally learned about spacing, I tested it myself. Instead of 10 hours in one night, I tried 2 hours each day across 5 days. At first, it felt slower. Like, why stretch this out when I can just finish it in one go? But when the exam came, something magical happened. The answers came to me naturally. I didn't even have to fight for them. And weeks later, I still remembered. That had never happened with cramming. The trick is simple. If you have a chapter to learn, break it into pieces. Study one piece today, another piece tomorrow, and then circle back to the first piece 2 days later. Don't wait until it's fading to nothing. Catch it just as it's slipping. That moment of recall, of pulling it back into your mind, is where the magic happens. And here's the best part. Spacing actually saves time in the long run. Sure, cramming feels fast, but then you forget everything and have to start over. Spacing feels slow, but it builds a memory that sticks. One effort multiplies over time instead of evaporating. So if you're the type to wait until the last minute, I know, because that was me, just try this once. Instead of sacrificing your sleep and sanity the night before, start a few days earlier. Give yourself room to breathe. You'll not only remember more, you'll also walk into the exam calm, without the zombie eyes and caffeine shakes. Trust me, once you experience how much easier it feels to recall things after spacing, you'll never want to go back to the all-nighter life again. Part 4. Retrieval Practice. Remembering by forgetting. This is where retrieval practice comes in. The idea is simple but powerful. Instead of feeding your brain by rereading, you make your brain pull out what it already knows. You test yourself. You try to recall. You force your mind to reach into its storage. And that act of pulling is what strengthens the memory. Scientists call this the testing effect. In one famous experiment, students who spent their time testing themselves remembered far more a week later than students who just reread their notes, even if both groups had studied for the same amount of time. It sounds almost unfair, but it makes sense. Your brain is like a muscle. If you only feed it information, it stays soft. But if you make it lift, if you make it recall, it gets stronger. I started trying this out in the simplest way. After reading a chapter, I'd close the book and just write down everything I could remember on a blank page. No peeking. At first, it was humiliating. I thought I knew so much. But when I actually tested myself, half of it was gone. Yet, here's the trick. The struggle itself was what locked the knowledge in. The very act of failing and then checking the answer made the memory stick 10 times deeper than rereading ever could. Sometimes, I'd pretend to explain the concept to an imaginary class. Other times, I'd make flashcards with questions on one side and answers on the other, quizzing myself before bed. What amazed me most was how quickly I could see progress. The first time, I'd get maybe 30% right. The next time, 50%. By the third time, I was breezing through like it was second nature. And the funny part? It wasn't just exams. Retrieval practice helped me in real conversations too. When I was learning English idioms, I didn't just read them. I'd quiz myself. And later, when talking to someone, the phrases popped out naturally, like they were ready and waiting. Here's the thing. Retrieval isn't always comfortable. You'll forget, you'll stumble, you'll get frustrated. But that discomfort is exactly where the learning happens. Every time you dig into your memory and come up empty, then refill it with the right answer, you're literally rewiring your brain. So the next time you study, don't just keep rereading like a hamster on a wheel. Close the book, test yourself, write down what you know, say it out loud, struggle a little. That's the workout your brain has been waiting for. And when the real test comes, whether it's on paper or in life, you'll be ready. Part 5. The Extra Tricks. Turning Knowledge into Yours. Once you've got the basics down, motivation, active learning, spacing, and retrieval, there's a whole toolbox of little tricks that can make studying even smoother. I like to think of these as cheat codes, not because they make things effortless, but because they help you cut through confusion and make knowledge feel like it's truly yours. One of my favorites is the Feynman Technique. Richard Feynman was a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, but what made him special wasn't just his genius, it was the way he explained things. He believed that if you can't explain an idea simply, like to a child, then you don't really understand it. And honestly, I tested this myself. I'd take a tricky concept, say something in design theory or in psychology, and I'd try to teach it to an imaginary 12-year-old. No jargon, no fancy words, just plain language. The moment I stumbled, I knew, that's the part I don't actually understand. So I'd go back, fill in the gap, and try again. Bit by bit, the concept became clearer, and I could explain it with ease. That's when I knew it had sunk in. Another powerful one is interleaving. Sounds technical, but it's simple. Instead of studying one topic for hours straight, you mix things up. For example, instead of spending 3 hours only on algebra, you do an hour of algebra, then an hour of geometry, then come back to algebra. At first, it feels messy, like you're not mastering anything, but research shows it actually makes your brain better at telling ideas apart and applying them flexibly. I noticed it most when learning languages. If I only drilled vocabulary for an hour, I'd forget half of it the next day. But when I mixed vocab, listening practice, and a bit of writing, my brain held on to it better. It's like cross-training for your mind. Then there's the magic of teaching others, also called the protégé effect. Honestly, this one blew me away. When you prepare to teach someone, even if that someone is just a friend or even your stuffed animal sitting on the desk, you automatically organize the material better. You start anticipating questions, spotting gaps, and connecting dots. I remember once helping a classmate with calculus. I wasn't a master myself, but as I tried to explain the formulas, I realized I was learning faster than ever. It felt like my brain was saying, if you're responsible for teaching, we'd better get this right. And let's not forget the power of worked examples. Sometimes we're too eager to jump into problems ourselves, but when you're new, it actually helps to watch someone else solve it step by step. I learned this the hard way with coding. I'd dive into problems, get stuck, and feel stupid. Then I switched. I followed worked examples carefully, paying attention to why each step was done. Only after that did I try on my own, and suddenly, things started to click. It's like watching someone cook a recipe before trying it yourself. You see the little details that aren't written down, and when you finally try, it feels less overwhelming. These tricks, Feynman, interleaving, teaching, worked examples, they all have one thing in common. They make learning active, personal, and flexible. They push you out of the comfort zone of just reading and nodding, and they force your brain to wrestle with knowledge until it becomes yours. So, the next time you sit down to study, try one of them. Pick a concept and explain it like you're teaching a kid. Shuffle your subjects instead of sticking to just one. Pretend you have to teach the material to a friend tomorrow. Or walk through an example step by step before tackling it yourself. You'll be surprised how much more alive studying feels when you stop being just a student and start acting like a thinker, a teacher, a problem solver. That's when you stop memorizing for the short term and start owning the knowledge for life. Part 6. Taking care of yourself. The hidden key to learning. Here's something I wish someone had told me earlier. Studying isn't just about books and notes. It's also about your body, your mind, and the way you treat yourself outside of study hours. For a long time, I thought the best way to succeed was to sacrifice everything, sleep, meals, even sanity, just to squeeze in more hours. But the truth? That approach will break you faster than it makes you smarter. The first thing is sleep. I can't stress this enough. There were so many nights I stayed up until 3 or 4 in the morning thinking I was being hardcore. But what actually happened was I dragged myself into the exam room with red eyes, a foggy head, and half the memory of what I had studied. Later I learned that sleep isn't wasted time. It's when your brain actually files away everything you studied during the day. It's like pressing save on your computer. Without it, you're just leaving unsaved documents open, waiting to crash. Once I started respecting sleep, my memory improved, without me even adding extra study hours. Then there's breaks. I used to push myself for hours straight, thinking that stopping was weakness. But all that did was leave me drained and resentful. Now I study in smaller bursts, 30 or 40 minutes of focus, then a short walk, a stretch, maybe a glass of water. It feels almost too simple, but those little breaks reset my brain. When I come back, I'm sharper. It's like hitting refresh on a browser that's starting to lag. And don't underestimate the basics. Movement and food. A quick workout, a short jog, or even just standing up and stretching, these things send more oxygen to your brain. And what you eat matters too. I learned the hard way that living on instant noodles and energy drinks only makes your brain sluggish. A good meal, some fruits, enough water, those things fuel your brain better than any caffeine overdose. Another thing that often gets ignored is patience. We live in a world where everyone shows off their results online. The guy who learned coding in 3 months. The girl who became fluent in Spanish in half a year. And when we compare ourselves to them, we feel behind. But the truth is, no one posts their struggles, their failed attempts, their sleepless nights. Learning isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. You will forget things, you will hit walls, you will feel dumb, and that's okay. The people who succeed aren't always the fastest learners. They're the ones who kept showing up, even when it wasn't glamorous. What helped me was keeping a little learning journal. Nothing fancy, just a notebook where I'd write, "Today I studied this. I remembered this much. I got stuck here." Over time, flipping back through those pages showed me that even when I felt stuck, I was actually making progress. The journal became proof that I was moving forward, even on days when it didn't feel like it. So yes, study techniques matter, but so does your health, your rest, and the kindness you show yourself along the way. The more balanced you are, the longer you can keep learning without burning out. And in the end, consistency beats intensity. A calm, rested brain will always outperform a stressed, exhausted one. So here's the big picture. Learning isn't about sitting at your desk for endless hours or torturing yourself with late-night cramming. It's about building a system that actually works with your brain, not against it. You've seen the pieces. Finding a strong why so you don't quit halfway. Switching from passive reading to active engagement. Spacing your sessions instead of cramming. Testing yourself through retrieval practice. Using clever tricks like the Feynman method or teaching others. And finally, taking care of your body and mind so you can keep going for the long run. It might feel like a lot, but you don't have to do everything at once. Start small. Maybe tonight, instead of rereading your notes for the 10th time, you close the book and try to explain one concept out loud. Maybe tomorrow, you set a timer to study for 30 minutes, then actually let yourself rest for 10. Just one tiny shift at a time. That's enough to change the whole game. And if you're doubting yourself, if you're thinking, "I've tried before, I always fail," let me remind you, forgetting, struggling, even failing, that's not proof you can't learn. That's part of learning. Every stumble is literally your brain rewiring itself to get stronger. You're not behind. You're just in the middle of the process. So here's my challenge for you. Pick one technique from this video, just one, and try it for the next week. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just start. Write down your why, or quiz yourself tonight, or space your sessions out this week. See what happens. Because learning isn't about being the smartest in the room. It's about being the one who keeps showing up, who learns how to learn, who refuses to give up just because it got hard. And if you do that, I promise you'll look back a month from now and realize you're already miles ahead of where you started. So go ahead, pick your one technique. Start today, and let's see how far you can go.